Hello composers and future composers, Chris Owenby here, and welcome to Ear Training 101 Lesson 2, where I teach you all about intervals. Let's dive on in. The first term you need to understand when talking about intervals, or the distance from one note to the next, is this term semitone, also known as half tone or half step. It's the smallest musical interval. So the semitone sounds like this. You hear that harsh dissonant quality between these two notes? Well, that's because they're side by side. This is a C, and this is a C sharp or a D flat. And when I play them together, they possess a harsh dissonant quality because they're so close together. I can't get any closer between these two notes, at least not on the piano. And that's known as the semitone, or more commonly referred to as the half step. Now here is a list of major, minor, and perfect intervals. The first interval that I put here, which is really not an interval, it's just a unison, is this C. It gives us a nice starting point. And so we move quickly to this minor second. Anytime you see this little m, that refers to minor, and this big M refers to major. Essentially, minor sounds have more of a sad quality, and major sounds have more of a bright, happy quality. So the minor second, if you'll remember, this C to this D flat is a semitone. So I can't get any smaller on the piano. That's known as a semitone or half step. Also a minor second. Now if I add a half step to this, the quality becomes less harsh. It's still dissonant, but not as harsh and dissonant as this minor second. So the major second, I add a half step. There's two half steps in this interval, and it has a softer dissonant quality. Now if I add another half step, it brings me to this minor third. You can tell this minor third has sort of a sad quality to it. And again, that's because of this word here, minor, meaning it's going to have a sad quality to it, but there's three half steps in this interval. If I were to add another half step, go up a half step, you notice how the quality becomes brighter, it becomes happier. Well, this is a major third. And that brings us to the perfect fourth. Add another half step and we get a perfect fourth. Now you're probably wondering, why in the world is this perfect and all these others are major and minor? Well, perfect simply means that there's no major or minor option. It is what it is. A perfect fourth in and of itself is a fourth. And you'll notice this fourth has a heroic quality to it. Think Star Wars, right? Or Superman, even Indiana Jones. Right? So the perfect fourth has that heroic quality to it. Now this next interval is a funny one. It's called the tritone. And for our purposes today, you just need to know that there are 6 half steps in this interval, and it has this strange sound to it. It's known as the tritone. And that brings us now to the perfect fifth. Now notice, there's that P again, standing for the word perfect. And there's a heroic quality to this interval. Remember, perfect intervals have that heroic sort of quality to them. Now this fifth can't be major, it can't be minor. It is perfect. It is what it is. There's only one perfect fifth. Next, the minor sixth. Again, that minor is going to refer to that sad quality that this interval possesses. There's the minor sixth. Add another half step and we get to the major sixth, which has a brighter, happier quality to it. All right, the next interval, minor seventh, which has 10 half steps in it, or 10 semitones, followed by the major seventh, which is very harsh and dissonant, 11 half steps in that interval, and brings us finally to the perfect octave. Again, that heroic quality. And a perfect, there's no major or minor option. It is what it is. Now, I want us to spend some time listening to the sounds that each one of these intervals possesses. So there's a different quality between this minor second and this major second. Listen closely. The C and the D flat played together, that very harsh dissonant quality. Well, if I were to change that C to an F and play the F sharp right above it, that's another semitone or half step or minor second, and it has the same harsh dissonant quality. Now back to the C and the D here. For the major second, it's still dissonant, but not quite as dissonant. This is a major second, and again, if I were to change the notes to an F and a G, play those together, it's dissonant but not as harsh as the minor second. So this is the minor second and the major second. They kind of clash. Now this is the minor third and the major third. The minor third has a sad quality, and the major third is brighter and happier. The way that you'll remember these two, I think the easiest is to note that they both have a pretty sound, but one is sadder and one is happier. So this is the minor and the major third. That brings us to the perfect fourth. Remember that heroic quality that it possesses, and the augmented fourth, which essentially means I'm going to raise that top note a half step and I get this augmented fourth. Now here's the funny thing about the augmented fourth, and as you'll soon learn, the diminished fifth, they're exactly the same interval. And they're also known as the tritone. I know that's confusing, but just hang on with me because it's really not that confusing, as you'll learn in upcoming teachings. So the perfect fourth followed by the augmented fourth, also known as the tritone, has that strange sound, and that brings us to the diminished fifth. We'll talk about that one first. The diminished fifth, as you may have heard me say, is exactly the same interval as this augmented fourth, and they're both also known as the tritone, and they sound kind of funny. So remember that sound. That's the diminished fifth and the tritone and the perfect fourth, all lumped into one interval there. And finally we get to the perfect fifth, the C to G. Notice that heroic quality the perfect fifth possesses. The minor sixth and the major sixth, that sad sound followed by the happier, brighter sound. But remember, these minor intervals and major intervals both sound pretty. You just have to remember that the minor ones have more of a sad sound, the major ones more of a happy sound. And the minor seventh, which is dissonant, it's a little harsh, and the major seventh, which is very dissonant, very harsh. Finally, the unison and the perfect octave. Now I lump these two together because they're all the same notes. This C and C side by side, exactly the same note. And the C to C, just 12 half steps above it, is known as the perfect octave. There's no major or minor option. It is what it is, C to C. Now, there are different ways to play these intervals. One is harmonic and one is melodic. Harmonic intervals occur when two notes are played at the same time, like so, creating harmony. Notice the root word of harmonic is harmony. When I play these notes at the same time, it creates harmony. Thus, this is a harmonic interval. But intervals can also be played melodically, like this, meaning that the two notes are played in sequence or one after the other, thus creating melody. So there's harmonic, meaning harmony, and then melodic, meaning melody, when the notes are played in sequence, one after the other. Now I want you to listen as I play the following intervals the two different ways, harmonically and then melodically. So harmonically together, that second sounds harsh and dissonant. But when I play the two notes separately or melodically, it sounds very nice. Just the C to the D. So there's the harmonic second followed by the melodic second. Now what I want you to do is listen to the following intervals, and I want you to be asking yourself questions as you're listening to these intervals. Ask yourself, is this interval major, minor, or perfect? Does this sound happy or bright? Does it have a sound kind of a sad kind of sound to it? Or does it sound perfect or heroic? So here is an example of a major interval. Notice that bright, happy sound. Here's a minor interval, that sort of sad sound, and then that heroic, perfect interval sound. And then the second question I want you to ask yourself is, are these notes close together or far apart? So if you hear this, well, that note sounds much lower than that note. So you know these notes are pretty far apart. And if you hear this interval, well, if I were to hum that, la, la, those notes are pretty close together. So it's easier for me to assume that this interval is probably a second or a third, as opposed to the first interval I played, which was so far apart and more likely an octave or something like that. And then the third question you want to ask yourself is, are these intervals melodic or harmonic? Are they played separately, these notes, or are they played at the same time? Okay, so here's the first example. So you ask yourself, does that have a bright, happy sound to it? Does it have a sad quality? Or does it sound heroic? And indeed it does possess a heroic sort of quality, so that interval must be perfect. Now the second question you want to ask is, are these notes close together or far apart? And if I were to hum them in my head, la, 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 and then maybe use the scale to step from that note to this note, la, 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 and then count those steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, I land on the fourth. So this is a perfect fourth. And I played these two notes separately, so they're melodic. This interval is melodic, perfect fourth. Here's another example. Play them together. So does this sound happy, sad, or heroic? It definitely has a happy, bright quality, so therefore this interval must be major. And then the second question is, how far are these notes apart? So I'm going to hum them in my head. Pretty close together. I'm going to step up using the scale. And I counted 3 steps. So 1, 2, 3 must be a third, and it was happy. So it's a major third, and I played them at the same time. So it's harmonic. This is a harmonic major third. Now let's do one more of these together. So that sounds pretty happy to me, pretty bright sounding. And la la, it's not very close together. So I know it's probably not a third or a fourth, especially since it's happy, but it's some kind of major interval. And it's far apart. Well, I'm going to use the scale and in my head count up from this note to this note. Lo, 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 lo. And I counted 6 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this must be a major sixth, and I'm playing the notes separately, so it's a melodic major sixth. Now congratulations if you caught on quickly and those intervals were pretty easy for you. But don't be discouraged if you couldn't name them all in the beginning. Remember, this sort of thing takes time and effort. It takes practice. And I recommend practicing 10 to 15 minutes on exercises like this per day. And I'll post some more exercises on the Artful Composer YouTube channel. Now I want to tell you about 2 courses that I'm really excited about. The Songwriters course, which is a 5-lesson course where I basically take you from scratch, start on how to learn to write songs that are effective. I take you through